lovely. So next up we have Sue. So Sue, a former officer herself and managing director of Sage Blue, a human capital innovation consultancy. So Sue's had a very successful and varied career, including a portfolio of non-exec directorships and NHS public appointments. In 2016, Sue was awarded an MBE for her services to business, charity and voluntary organisations. So we're so delighted and honoured to be hosting you today, Sue. I will hand over to you now, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you very much. Hello everybody, and it's with a real honour to be able to spend some time with you. I want to, a bit of a spoiler alert, I want to begin with the end in mind, and by that I simply mean this. My message to you is, you are better than you think you are. All right, you're better than you think you are, and that the future that we all have ahead of us can be ours by design. All right, and how do I know that? I know that obviously from my own lived experience, but also from journeying alongside colleagues over the years, and working and studying with different people from different backgrounds, and for in particular the women that I have coached and mentored. So let me just share some of the insights that sit behind that very, very important thought. You are better than you think you are. All right. First of all, it's the human condition to have, doubt, anxiety, concern, particularly when we have got big transition moments. So for those of you that are leaving the military, leaving the armed forces and heading into civvy street, this is a big transition moment. We know that. For those of us that have already done it and we are thinking about our next step or our next career, guess what? These are still big transition moments. So right there at the heart, we have these moments of doubt, anxiety and concern. We're asking ourselves lots of questions, and we can become somewhat vulnerable in those moments and somewhat hypervigilant. Because in that window, okay, we become vulnerable to other people's labelling of us, other people's negative opinion of us. Let me give you an example by what I mean by that. It's the comments that people make that are couched particularly for our own benefit. So we're going to apply for a particular role and somebody will say, are you going to really apply for that role? What makes you think you're qualified for that? Or they do the, don't set your sights too high, or yeah, but if you don't get it, it's not the worst thing that can happen. All of those little comments, all of those little platitudes, what they can do is quietly erode away our self-belief and our self-confidence. But if we allow them to take hold, then something more sinister can happen. It can lead to low self-esteem, low self-worth. And even if we get the role or the opportunity that we've been inquiring about or seeking, what can happen is we get embedded in us is that awful syndrome, which is called imposter syndrome. And for some of us, imposter syndrome can start to unravel a little and erode away at some of our confidence. So often what happens with these big transition moments, what we do is we opt to play safe. So we settle for something a little bit less than our skills, our ability, or our capability would indicate. I remind you, you're better than you think you are. All right. And this isn't just a phenomenon that happens with women. This happens with men and also with people who identify as being non-binary. We've got to always remember that we're not just two genders here. All right. But this is underpinned by research also. And what the research has shown, and there's huge and tons of evidence supporting this, is that women in particular lack self-confidence in their own abilities when compared with men. But I want to remind everybody that in reality, when we're talking about our own abilities and we're talking about confidence and self-esteem, it's all contextual. It is all dependent on the situation that we are in. It's an overgeneralization for us all to be thinking that we lack confidence or we've got lower self-esteem, particularly when we are transitioning from where we feel very comfortable to something else. And let me give you a couple of practical examples. 2016, I took up a new role. I became a group chair for the Academy for Chief Executives. And the Academy of Chief Executives runs peer-to-peer groups. It takes groups of, obviously, clues in the name, chief executives, and journeys with them for 1 to 2 years. And the groups meet on a monthly basis, and there's some learning, and there's some looking at themselves, and there's looking at challenges that they face within their business. So it's a really, a rich and dynamic community and closed group that gets formed. So I'm coming in 2016, and I'm meeting and mixing with colleagues, and I'm having a look at some of the chief exec groups that are being run. And one of the things I noticed was that a lot of the groups just had 1 or 2 women in, so they were predominantly male. So I said to my colleagues, I want to set up a senior and women in business group. And they said, well, bonkers, Sue, why do we need that? We've got representation, we've got a good gender mix, we don't. And I said, no, I'm going to set up a senior women in business group. So I set up a group, and I drew the group from women who were in senior positions in FTSE listed companies. Now, this group was shocking for me in that we've got high profile, highly successful women in highly influential roles. And what was shocking to me was, and that first group meeting, what emerged was the very thing that I'm talking about, that very, very dynamic. The seed had got hold, and we had huge amounts of imposter syndrome, and we had people lacking in confidence. So they were questioning themselves around, by what right, am I good enough, riddled with self-doubt. It took us a couple of months, don't get me wrong, we eradicated that, and these are women that continue to flourish and have gone on to do bigger and far more impactful and profound jobs. But the seed had taken hold and had been allowed to grow and flourish. So I encourage you to be mindful of this dynamic. It's a real thing. Now, my lived experience, I'm confident, I'm assertive, I've had a very, very diverse career as you were hearing. I've transitioned out of the military, I've had senior executive roles, I've set up my own businesses, I sit on a range of boards, all of this. But even I sometimes find myself where when I'm making a transition, I too find that if I'm not careful and not alert to the fact that what can happen is those moments of doubt, anxiety, concern, and those little labels that sometimes people throw in to the conversation and how they can take hold. Let me give you another example. Last year, I was approached by a recruitment company on LinkedIn. There's a clue there, by the way, for those of you that are job searching. It's really important, leverage LinkedIn. But I was approached by a recruitment company, and they sent me a message, and the message was simply this. NHS Lincolnshire is looking to set up a new board of non-exec directors. Do you know anybody in your network that would be suitable for this? So there was the request. I gave it a little bit of thought, went back and said, actually, at this moment in time, there's nobody in my network that I think I could signpost you to. A week later, I get a phone call, and it's the same recruitment company, and the recruitment company is saying, as you may be aware, there are NHS Lincolnshire has got 4 clinical commissioning groups. It's merging them down to 1, and they're creating a new board, and we would be interested to find out if you'd be interested in applying. So seed 1 for me was, there's an opportunity, but they hadn't, in that initial contact, hadn't put me forward as somebody who they potentially thought that this was an opportunity for me. Seed 2, I'm going, hang on a minute, right, you're actually thinking about me. I've now got a little internal narrative going, oh my gosh, am I good enough? Do I have enough knowledge? Do I have enough expertise? So what I said was, look, I need some more information, and the nature of who I am, I'm going to go and have some informal conversations. I'm going to find out a little bit more. So I found somebody who was going to be leaving the board, very, very senior in terms of NHS Lincolnshire CCG, and I went and had a cup of coffee with him. First question he asked me after, hello Sue, how are you? So I understand you're interested in, yeah. So we had the, the superficial pleasantries that one always has at these things. And then it was a first question. It was this, have you ever been a chief exec of an NHS trust? So I went, no. He said, are you a doctor? No. So then he sat back and said, so why on earth do you think you would be qualified to be a non-exec director of NHS Lincolnshire's Clinical Commissioning Group? Oh my goodness. Now, if that comment, that labelling, his view and opinion right there in that moment, if I had allowed that to take hold, I would have walked away going, you know what, I'm not going to be welcome here. This isn't for me. But that's not who I am, because I recognised, first of all, my achievements, my skills. I'd really looked at what they were looking for. Now, one of the things as women, what we often do when we see opportunities, we look to deselect ourselves, not to select ourselves in. So we look at the things that we can't do. But I looked at this profile and I went, you know what? 85% of that I do. I sit on boards, I influence at the highest level, up and down the country and internationally. And it's just like, what do you mean, have I been a chief exec of an NHS trust? You know, being a NED is not about just the, you know, being the graveyard, as I call it, of former NHS, you know, chief execs. No, not this woman, not this woman. So obviously I subsequently put in my application, was shortlisted and attended interview. Now, don't get me wrong, I came out of the interview absolutely convinced there was no way they're going to offer me this role. Why? I showed up as my authentic self. I was articulate, and in places I was challenging. Imagine my surprise when a couple of days later I get the call from the chair, Sean, and he said, we'd really like to offer you the role. I was like, really? You see, some of that labelling, some of that negative opinion of others had landed, but I'd managed to overcome it. And I'm encouraging you to overcome it, because you are better than you think you are. You really are. So what are some of the things that got me through making that decision and proceeding with that? It was a fundamental belief. I know that nothing builds our self-esteem and our self-confidence than accomplishment. So I had to really remind myself about where I am very good, not where other people think I'm good, where I am very good. So my own self-worth and own self-belief. Because when you can tap into your own achievements and your own accomplishments, and when you really want something, you know something, you remember you are good at this. You are better than you think you are. And it's your future, as this is my future, and it should be by design, not by just settling to feel safe and lower your expectations. We are part of an armed forces community, and the skills and the knowledge and expertise that we have and we gain and we learn can be transformative in the wider world. So I'm encouraging you, really and truly, remember, you're better than you think you are, and you can design your future. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And we've had a message from somebody in the audience who I think sums it up perfectly. So Sue, you're an inspiration and you're so motivating. This stuff is really resonating. So thank you. I am conscious of time, but we do have a couple of questions if you'd be happy just to take one. It was submitted before the event, and it's so you have insights into a lot of different sectors. Are there any that have shown to particularly value ex-military talent?
Oh, absolutely. And believe it or not, obviously I've used the NHS by my own example, but the NHS in particular, and the NHS right now is undergoing and about to embark on some significant change. So we're moving to an integrated care system. And as a consequence to that, right now there are new roles being created at all levels. And I think we are incredibly well positioned to be able to take up some of those roles. So the NHS most definitely. Definitely also the public sector per se, local government, again, undergoing restructure at the moment, and the plans for the next 3 to 5 years. So there are opportunities there. But believe it or not, the professional services, and by that I'm talking about the big accountancy firms, and I'm talking about financial services. They have got a really strong history of recognising the talent and the skills and the ability of people who've served. They really have.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sue. Hopefully you can see some of the messages of thanks coming through in the chat function already. We really do appreciate your time. So thank you again. And we hope to hear from you again in the future. So next